They called him just the black driver. He heard it clearly, not whispered, not regretted, just stated, like an instruction. And the woman who said it turned away before she finished the sentence, already done with him, already moving toward the gold light and the applause and the long tables set with white linen that had never once been touched by rain. But Marcus Elijah Hale had stood in worse weather than this. He had stood in weather that had no name for what it was. And he had not moved then, and he did not move now. He was 52 years old, in a black vest and a white shirt that had been pressed that morning with the same care he gave to everything. The iron set to the correct temperature, the collar straightened in the bathroom mirror, the challenge coin placed in his left breast pocket before he put the jacket on. The coin had been there for 19 years. It would be there until he didn't need it anymore. Outside the Arlington Grand, the rain came down at a slant and the awning above the VIP entrance gave cover to almost no one. The Lincoln Town cars and the black SUVs pulled up in sequence, and Marcus opened each door with the same slight nod, the same steadiness, the same eyes that took everything in and gave nothing back. A man in a camel overcoat walked past him without acknowledgement. A woman handed him her wrap like he was a hook on a wall. Marcus held it, folded it once across his forearm, and said nothing. He had been doing this for 6 years. The job was quiet. That was the point. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Because the story of what happened inside that ballroom is one that people in every city in this country need to hear. The ballroom of the Arlington Grand was dressed the way grief gets dressed when someone else is paying for the flowers. American flags on standing poles at each corner of the stage. A projection screen the width of a small house displaying slow-moving photographs of men and women in uniform. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, centerpieces that cost more than a month of disability benefits. The event was called the Liberty Valor Gala. The foundation that hosted it, Liberty Valor Foundation, had been operating for 11 years, raising money for veterans transitioning out of military service. On its website, there were testimonials, photographs of handshakes and check presentations, a mission statement that used words like gratitude and sacrifice and community in every third sentence. The woman who built it stood at the edge of the stage in an ivory evening gown, her hair set in a way that photographed well from any angle. Victoria Langford was 45 and precise, not in the way that careful people are precise, but in the way that controlled people are precise. She controlled what was seen. She controlled what was said. She controlled who stood close enough to the camera to be associated with generosity, and who was kept far enough away to remain invisible. She was speaking with her event director, Elliot Crane, her voice low and efficient. The veterans in the third row need to be closer to the camera line, but not at the sponsors' tables. Keep them visible, not expensive. She glanced at the display at the far end of the ballroom, a long table draped in dark blue fabric, lined with framed photographs of service members. And I want the staging perfect for when the governor walks in. Elliot nodded and moved away. Victoria's gaze swept the room the way a pilot sweeps an instrument panel, not to appreciate it, but to assess it for risk. She did not look at the display table long enough to notice that one of the photographs had the wrong name beneath it. Marcus noticed. He had come inside only to check the timing on the VIP arrival schedule. The ballroom doors were open, the event not yet formally begun, and he had stepped just inside the threshold, no further than the carpet's edge, when his eyes found the table. The photographs were arranged chronologically, a visual history of local service members from the past 3 decades. Some faces were familiar to people in the room. Some were familiar only to the people who had served beside them. One face was familiar only to Marcus. The frame was positioned near the center of the table. The photograph showed a man in his mid-30s in dress uniform, his expression serious in the way that men who understand the weight of a moment tend to look serious. Beneath the photograph, a small printed placard read, "Unknown service member, Operation Southern Shield, 2005. Marcus stood very still. He read it again, unknown. Aaron Bell had not been unknown. Aaron Bell had been the clearest human being Marcus had ever stood next to in the field. A man whose hands were steady when everyone else's were shaking, whose voice was the one you wanted to hear when the situation stopped having a protocol. Aaron Bell had been in that convoy. Aaron Bell had helped Marcus hold a perimeter for 40 minutes while the civilians were brought out one by one. Aaron Bell had died on the way back, in a vehicle that took fire on a road that wasn't on any map they'd been given. And because the mission had been categorized at a level that kept it from being discussed publicly for years, and because the men who wrote the official reports had decided the story was cleaner without a second name, Aaron Bell had spent 19 years in every official record labeled as unknown or unattached or omitted entirely. Marcus stepped toward the table. He did not announce himself. He did not ask permission. He picked up the small placard with both hands, turned it over, looked at the blank reverse side, and set it down facing upward. He intended to find someone, an event staffer, a coordinator, anyone, and explain that the name needed to be corrected. He was still holding the placard when Victoria Langford's voice cut across the room. "Excuse me." It was not a question. It was a sound designed to stop movement. Marcus turned. Victoria was walking toward him with the specific stride of a woman who had never once doubted that people would clear a path. Two event staff members flanked her at a slight distance, the way small planets move around a sun. Her eyes moved from Marcus's face to the placard in his hands to his vest to the earpiece of his radio, to some internal conclusion she reached in approximately 1 second. "He's just the black driver," she said, and her voice was set at exactly the volume required to be heard by the 4 or 5 donors standing nearest. "Why is he inside?" The room did not go fully silent, but it changed. The way a room changes when something is said that everyone pretends not to hear while everyone hears it. Marcus set the placard on the table. He did not put it down the way a person puts something down when they've been told to. He placed it carefully, with the intention of returning to it. "Ma'am," he said, "this name is wrong." Victoria stopped 2 feet from him. Her expression had the quality of polished stone, smooth, hard, and completely unreflective. "Your job is to open doors," she said, "not to correct history." Someone near the bar let out a short sound that might have been a laugh and might have been something else. Marcus looked at her. He had nothing behind his eyes that she could use. No anger, no embarrassment, no appeal for understanding. He said, "Sometimes the people left outside remember the truth better than the people on stage." Victoria's expression did not shift, but something around it did. A tightening at the jaw, a precise recalibration. She raised one hand slightly, and a security officer appeared at Marcus's left shoulder. Colin Price was broad, efficient, and loyal to whoever was signing the event permit. He had a voice calibrated for moving people without touching them. "Sir, you need to wait outside with the other driver." Marcus did not look at Colin. He looked at the ballroom where the stage was lit and the podium was set, and the governor of the state was expected within the hour. Then he looked back at the display table, at the face beneath the word unknown. He reached into his left breast pocket. The challenge coin was there, as it always was. A thick bronze disc the size of a large button, worn smooth on the face from years of handling. On one side, the crest of his unit. On the other side, in letters too small to read from more than a few inches away, "No man left outside." He was moving to place it in his jacket pocket when Colin stepped forward, the movement slight and incidental, and the coin slipped from Marcus's fingers. It rang against the marble floor, a clean, resonant sound, small and precise in the large room. A sound that hit at a pitch that made people nearby look down. Victoria looked at it. Then she looked at Marcus with the flat certainty of someone who had run out of patience for a problem she considered beneath her. "Pick that up," she said, "and take him out before the governor arrives." Marcus crouched and picked up the coin. He held it for a moment in his closed fist. His lips moved once, barely, almost nothing. No man left outside. He straightened. He walked with Colin to the side exit. He did not look back. And Victoria Langford returned to her event, satisfied that she had maintained the standard. She had no idea what she had just done. 3 weeks before the gala, Marcus Hale had been sitting in his apartment at 6 in the morning with a cup of black coffee and the newspaper he still took in print, not because he was nostalgic, but because he liked the pace of it. The apartment was small and clean. A person walking in for the first time would notice what wasn't there before they noticed what was. No television in the living room. No decorative objects that didn't have a use. No photographs on the walls. There was one bookshelf. On the top shelf, pushed to the back and facing the wall, was a picture frame. It had been turned that way for 6 years. Marcus knew what was in it, and he didn't need to see it to remember. He had been Sergeant Major Marcus Elijah Hale, United States Army, 22 years of service. He had risen through the ranks quietly and completely, without the noise that sometimes came with ambition, because his ambition had never been personal. He wanted the mission done right. He wanted the men next to him to go home. He had organized himself entirely around those two things for more than 2 decades. The mission that ended his career had been called Operation Southern Shield. It was a diplomatic escort operation that had escalated beyond its parameters when a political situation on the ground deteriorated faster than the intelligence had predicted. The convoy Marcus commanded included 6 military personnel and a party of 4 civilian officials. One of those officials was Daniel Whitaker, the than a 38-year-old state-level foreign policy envoy on his first overseas assignment. When the convoy was stopped by a damaged bridge and then caught between two positions, Marcus had organized the evacuation with the precision of a man who had rehearsed for this, even though he hadn't. Even though nothing could rehearse a person for this, he sent the civilians out first in the order of their vulnerability. He held the position himself, rotating the remaining personnel back towards safety, always the last to move, always accounting for the person behind him. Aaron Bell was with him until the last vehicle. Aaron was the one who drove. They were 4 minutes out when the road was hit. The vehicle didn't flip. It stopped hard and sudden, and the fire started in the engine. Marcus got out. He pulled Aaron out. Aaron was breathing. They moved. They reached the secretary position. And then Aaron's breathing changed, and Marcus sat in the dust of a road that had no name, 40 minutes from the nearest medevac point, and held his friend's hand while something irreversible happened. By the time the formal report was filed, Aaron Bell was listed as support personnel, unattached. The reasons were explained to Marcus by a colonel who spoke in the passive voice about sensitivity classifications and the need for narrative clarity in situations of geopolitical complexity. Marcus listened to all of it. Then he said, "If the story leaves him out, it can leave me out too." Declined the commendation. He declined the public recognition. He submitted his retirement paperwork 6 weeks later, and he moved to a city where no one knew his name in the context they would have known it. And he drove people in luxury vehicles from one place to another. And he kept Aaron Bell's face in a box in the back of his closet. And he kept the challenge coin in his breast pocket. And he kept the promise he had made in the dust of a nameless road. The promise was simple. It was not dramatic. It was just, "I won't let you stay unknown." He had been working toward that promise for years, quietly, in the way that men who have learned patience work toward things. He had been building a record. When a former accounting employee of Liberty Valor Foundation named Ray Coleman called him 2 months before the gala, Marcus had not been surprised. He had known something was wrong with that foundation for longer than Ray had been willing to say it out loud. Ray came to Marcus's apartment on a Tuesday evening with a manila envelope and the expression of a man who had been carrying something too heavy to keep carrying alone. He sat at Marcus's kitchen table and spread out the contents slowly, like a person laying down cards they know will change the game, but aren't sure they're ready for that change. The documents were specific and detailed. Hotel receipts from properties in cities where Liberty Valor had hosted outreach events. Receipts that showed luxury suites booked for Victoria Langford and her senior staff on dates that matched the events, categorized in the foundation's accounts as program expenses. Consulting invoices submitted by a firm owned by Grant Ellison, Victoria's political advisor. Invoices paid from the foundation's general fund over a period of 4 years in amounts that totaled just over $800,000. A spreadsheet, printed from an internal system, showing a queue of 237 veteran assistance applications marked deferred indefinitely. Not denied, never denied, just held in perpetual suspension, waiting for a funding disbursement that was always described as pending, and an email thread. The most recent message in the thread was from Victoria Langford to Grant Ellison, sent at 11:42 in the evening on a Thursday in March of the previous year. It read, "Keep the veterans visible, not expensive." Ray sat across from Marcus and said, "They use our uniforms in their videos, Marcus, but when the cameras turn off, nobody answers the phone." Marcus looked at the documents for a long time without speaking. Then he asked Ray if he had the originals secured. Ray said he did. Marcus told him to keep them somewhere safe, that he would tell him when it was time. Ray asked when that would be. Marcus said, "When there's a room full of right people." The company Marcus worked for received the contract for VIP transport at the Liberty Valor Gala 2 weeks before the event. Marcus requested the assignment. His supervisor, who had known him for 5 years and had never once heard him request a specific contract, looked at him for a moment and then put his name on the list without asking why. On the night of the gala, Marcus arrived at the Arlington Grand at 5:45 in the evening. The rain had started at 5. He parked the town car in the designated driver holding area, put on his jacket, straightened his cuffs, and put the challenge coin in his breast pocket. In the trunk of the car, in a flat leather portfolio case he had bought at an office supplies store, was a copy of every document Ray had given him, organized by category, with handwritten index tabs. He had also made a call 4 days earlier to a journalist named Patricia Owens, who covered local politics for a regional paper. He hadn't told her what would happen. He had told her that something would happen at the Liberty Valor Gala that she would not want to miss. and that she should bring her press credentials and a camera crew if the paper could manage it. Patricia had asked him how he knew. Marcus had said, "Because I've been in enough situations to recognize when one is about to resolve." Patricia was in the press pool inside the ballroom when Marcus was escorted out through the side's exit. The rain against his shoulders was cold and direct. Colin Price stood at the interior side of the exit door for a moment, then returned to his post without looking back. The door closed. Marcus stood under the edge of the awning with 4 other drivers. 2 men he had exchanged names with before. 1 man he hadn't, and a younger man named Darius, who drove for a competitor company and had been watching from a distance when Marcus was brought out. Darius said, "Man, why didn't you say something?" Marcus looked at the rain. Through the tall glass panels of the ballroom's side wall, he could see the interior, the stage, the lights, the photographs. He could see the display table and a small frame with Aaron Bell's face and the wrong name. "Because some rooms are built to hear titles, not truth," he said. Darius looked at the side of Marcus's face and decided not to push further. Inside, Victoria's event moved forward with the precision she had engineered. The program unfolded in the order she had printed on the schedule. A retired general spoke briefly. A local choir performed. Dinner was served. The wine was excellent. The photographs on the projection screen rotated through their slow cycle, and people who had paid between $5,000 and $50,000 for their seats applauded at the appropriate moments and felt, for those moments, genuinely grateful for something. Victoria watched the room from the side of the stage, and the room looked exactly like what she had designed it to look like, and she felt the particular satisfaction of someone who has built a machine and watched it run. Grant Ellison stood near the back, a glass of water in his hand, monitoring the event with the attentiveness of a man who needed everything to go smoothly and had specific reasons for that need. He had a phone in his jacket pocket that he checked at intervals of about 4 minutes. He was waiting for the governor's car to arrive and for the announcement of the new state partnership that would give Liberty Valor Foundation a level of legitimacy that would make the next fiscal year significantly more comfortable. Grant had built the Liberty Valor arrangement carefully. It had taken 2 years of small adjustments, reclassifying expenses here, adjusting line items there, to bring the foundation's finances to a state where they could sustain the lifestyle Victoria required and the political overhead he needed. He thought of it as resource optimization. He thought of the veterans whose applications sat in the deferred queue as a necessary inefficiency. He did not think about them often. The rain on the tall glass panels sounded like static. From inside the warmth and light of the ballroom, it was almost decorative. Governor Daniel Whitaker's motorcade arrived at 7:21. The protocol had been established in advance. The governor would enter through the main VIP entrance, be greeted by Victoria, proceed to his designated table, and then be introduced to the audience at the 8 o'clock mark to deliver remarks. The remarks had been prepared by Grant's office and reviewed twice by the governor's communications director. They were efficient and gracious, and said exactly what a governor says at a charity event when the charity has been vetted, which this one had been. Though the vetting had not been thorough enough, Victoria had deftly ensured that Marcus was kept away from the main entrance. Colin had been given the instruction directly, keep the driver at the side. So when the governor's vehicles pulled up to the Arlington Grand's main portico, it was a different door that was opened, a different set of hands that reached out, and as Marcus was on the other side of the building, standing in the rain, his back to the wall, his hand around the challenge coin in his pocket. Governor Whitaker entered the ballroom at 7:23. He was 56, a tall man who moved with the ease of someone who had been in rooms like this for 20 years, but had never quite stopped feeling slightly out of place in them, a quality that had made him consistently underestimated and consistently effective. He shook the hands that were offered, said the expected things, and allowed himself to be steered toward the sponsor table where his water glass was already poured. He did not look happy to be here. He had been skeptical of this event for months, had raised questions internally that Grant had answered smoothly and thoroughly, and had ultimately agreed to attend because withdrawing would have created a story he didn't want to manage. He would deliver his remarks, acknowledge the foundation's work, and return to his office to deal with the 17 other things that were waiting. Victoria greeted him at 8 o'clock with the full radiance of her public-facing self. She introduced him to the audience with a warmth that stopped just short of reverence. She stepped back from the podium and applauded with everyone else as he stepped forward. He adjusted the microphone. He looked at the room, the tables, the faces, the flags, the screen with the photographs rotating in their slow loop. He opened the folder in front of him and looked at the first line of his prepared remarks, then looked toward the tall glass panels along the side wall. Through the glass, in the gray-blue light of the rain, he saw a figure standing under the edge of the awning. A tall man in a black vest, shoulders damp, posture straight, a stillness about him that was not passivity, but something else. The stillness of a person who has been still under much worse conditions and has learned to make it mean something. Governor Whitaker's eyes stayed on that figure for 3 seconds. Then he recognized the shape of him. Not the features. The rain and the glass in the distance made features secondary. What he recognized was the way the man stood, the particular geometry of a person who has decided they are not going to move until everyone else is safely out. Daniel Whitaker had seen that posture once before, on a road that wasn't on any map, when a sergeant major had put his body between a line of civilians and the thing that was coming and simply refused to leave. The governor closed his folder. Victoria noticed. She was standing at the edge of the stage, and she saw him close the folder, and she interpreted it as a technical problem. He had the wrong notes, or the microphone was feeding back, and she took one step toward him with the intention of solving it. He didn't look at her. He stepped back from the podium and walked down the 3 steps from the stage to the ballroom floor. The audience watched him with the particular alertness that comes when something breaks from a script. Victoria said, "Governor," in a voice just above a whisper. He kept walking. Colin Price, responding to the movement, started to intercept from his security position. This was his training. Any unplanned deviation in principal movement required intervention. But Governor Whitaker raised one hand without looking at him, a gesture so precise and practiced that Colin stopped without taking another step. The governor walked the length of the ballroom. He pushed the side exit door open himself. The rain came in with the cold air. Marcus turned. They stood in the doorway of the light and the dark, the warm and the cold, separated by whatever those years had made of them, and they looked at each other. The governor of the state stood straighter than he had stood all evening. He raised his right hand to his brow. It was a military salute, precise, complete, given by a civilian to a man who was no longer technically in a position to receive one, but who had earned it in a way that superseded technicality. Sergeant Major Hale. The voice carried into the ballroom behind him. Every person at every table heard it. Every camera in the press pool captured it. Marcus was very still. He had not expected this. He had not planned for this particular shape of recognition. Not here, not tonight. Not with his shoulders wet and his coin in his fist, and Aaron Bell's name still printed wrong on a placard inside. He had come here to do something specific and methodical, and this moment was outside of that, and it moved through him the way unexpected things move through people who have spent years keeping their feelings in disciplined order. He brought his right hand up. Governor Whitaker. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The ballroom behind the governor had gone completely quiet. 340 people in formal attire, holding glasses of wine and water and whiskey, were watching through the open door as the governor of the state they lived in stood in the rain and saluted a driver. Victoria Langford's face went through several things in rapid sequence. The first was confusion. The second was recognition, not of who Marcus was, but of what this moment was doing to her event. The third was a recalculation, swift and professional. The instinctive pivot of someone who has spent decades turning unexpected situations into manageable narratives. She moved toward the door. Governor Whitaker turned to Colin Price and said, quietly and without edge, "Open the VIP barrier and let this man in." Colin looked at Victoria. Victoria was still recalibrating. Colin looked back at the governor. He walked to the velvet rope on the side entrance and unclipped it. Marcus walked into the ballroom. He did not walk in like a guest. He did not walk in like a winner. He walked in with the same unhurried, deliberate step he had always had, the step of a man who knows exactly where he is going and has decided, before he takes the first stride, that he is going to arrive. The governor walked beside him back to the stage at the podium. Governor Whitaker stood for a moment with both hands on the edges of the lectern and looked at the room. He didn't look at the speech he had prepared. He looked at the room the way you look at something you've been seeing wrong for a while and are beginning to see correctly. "This man," he said, "is not just a driver." The room held its breath. He did not speak long. He spoke exactly as much as the truth required. He described the mission, the elements that had been declassified, the convoy, the damaged bridge, the deteriorating situation, the extraction. He described watching a sergeant major send every person in that convoy out before himself. He described the vehicle he had been in reaching safety and then turning back and seeing, through the dust, the figure of Marcus Hale standing at the last position, accounting for the last person. He said, "I built a career on the language of service," but he lived it before anyone was taking notes. He paused, then he said, "And when the report was filed, his name was there, but another name wasn't. And rather than accept that, he walked away from everything he was owed, every commendation, every recognition, everything, because he would not be celebrated while his brother in arms was erased." Victoria was watching this with the careful attention of someone watching their carefully constructed building develop a structural problem. She understood what was happening. She had not survived 20 years in philanthropic fundraising without understanding which way the wind's shifting. She stepped forward toward the stage with the expression of someone who is about to make an asset out of a liability. "What an honor," she said, her voice pitched for the room. "Sergeant Major, we would love to formally recognize you tonight." Marcus turned and looked at her. Just looked. It was not a long look, but it was a complete one. He said, "Then start by spelling Aaron Bell's name correctly." The room's attention moved, like water finding a lower level, toward the display table at the far end of the ballroom. The small frame with the wrong placard, "Unknown service member." The words were printed in a clean, professional font. They had been set up by a staff member who had been given a list and no context. An older man in the third row, one of the veterans who had been positioned there, close enough to the camera line but not at the sponsor tables, stood up slowly. He looked at the display table, then he looked at the stage. No one told him to sit back down. Victoria began, "We will correct the display immediately. Tonight is about healing." "No, ma'am." Marcus's voice was not raised. It was simply present. The way certain sounds are simply present, the low register of something that has weight behind it. Tonight is about what happens after the cameras leave. He reached inside his jacket. He removed the leather portfolio. He walked to the podium and set it on the lectern. Grant Ellison moved from his position near the back wall. He moved quickly but tried to look unhurried, which produced the particular gait of a man who is alarmed but managing the optics of being alarmed. He said as he came within range, "This is not the proper venue for." "It became the proper venue," Marcus said without turning to look at him, "when you used their faces to raise money." The governor looked at Grant. He said, "Simply, what is that?" Marcus opened the portfolio. "Patricia Owens." Standing with her camera operator in the press pool at the side of the room, had been watching since the door opened. She gave a slight nod, and the camera operator framed on the documents. Through the coordination of the venue's event technology system, something that required a staff member with access to the HDMI routing panel, something that a young woman named Dana, who worked audiovisual for the hotel, had prepared for, because Marcus had called her 3 days earlier and explained what he needed and why. And she had listened and said yes. The documents appeared on the projection screen above the stage. Not all of them, the clearest ones, the hotel receipts, the consulting invoices, the queue of applications marked deferred indefinitely, and the email. Keep the veterans visible, not expensive. The room took the words in slowly, because the room had been designed to receive things slowly. The warm light, the music, the careful calibration of emotion that a gala requires. But this landed differently. This did not fit the calibration. The older veteran in the third row who had been standing said aloud, not loudly, just clearly, "You raised money in our names and called us expensive?" His voice had the particular quality of someone who has spent time in environments where you needed to be heard, who had long ago stopped apologizing for taking up acoustic space. Victoria turned to him. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. Marcus said, "A misunderstanding is getting a name wrong. This is getting the whole mission wrong. It was not a performance. It was not a speech. It was the kind of sentence that receives when someone has been thinking clearly for a long time and finally finds the right room." Grant Ellison's phone was in his hand. He was looking at the screen with the expression of someone receiving information that confirms a fear he had been managing for months. Governor Whitaker had turned entirely from the podium and was looking at Grant with a stillness that was something close to what Marcus had. That same quality of having decided something and being fully in the decision. "Did my office know about this?" the governor said. Grant opened his mouth. He closed it. He said, "There are processes," and then stopped because the governor was no longer listening to him. The governor spoke to his legal counsel, who had been at a table near the exit all evening with a briefcase that now became relevant. He gave instructions in a voice that was quiet enough to be private and clear enough to be unambiguous. The financial records of Liberty Valor Foundation would be secured before anyone left the building. The State Inspector General's office would be contacted tonight. A review board would be assembled within 48 hours. He turned back to the room. "Tonight," he said, "I came here to praise a foundation. Instead, I am asking for its records." He listed what would happen. The foundation's authority to receive public funds was suspended immediately. All unallocated donations were frozen pending audit. A board of independent reviewers, 3 veteran advocates, 2 forensic accountants, 1 attorney with no ties to either the foundation or the governor's political organization, would examine every transaction of the past 11 years. Victoria Langford was removed from her position as president pending the investigation. Grant Ellison's role as senior campaign advisor was suspended, and his files transferred to the State Ethics Commission. Victoria stood on the floor of her own gala and received all of this in front of every person she had spent years trying to impress. She looked at Marcus with something she did not have the architecture to name. Her public face was still in place, but it had developed the quality of a wall with water behind it, holding, but not for much longer. "You came here to destroy everything I built," she said. Marcus looked at her without anger. He had no anger left for her. He had spent his anger 19 years ago in better places, on better causes. "No," he said. "I came here because you built it on men you never intended to serve." Then he turned away from her. Governor Whitaker stepped down from the stage again and walked to the display table at the far end of the ballroom. He stood in front of the frame with the wrong placard and he said, "How should this read?" Marcus came to stand beside him. He reached out and picked up the small placard with both hands. He held it in a way he hadn't held anything in a long time, carefully, like something fragile, though it was only cardboard and ink. His hands were not entirely steady. "Staff Sergeant Aaron Bell," he said. He was not unknown. He was just left out. An event staffer removed the old placard. Someone produced a printed replacement, typed and printed at the event center's front desk in the minutes that Patricia Owens had quietly requested it, because she had been in this business long enough to recognize a moment that needed to be completed rather than just reported. Marcus placed the new placard in the frame himself. He set it down the same way he set everything down, with full attention, with both hands, with the particular care of a person who understands that how you put something down is part of the thing. The room stood, not because anyone signaled them, not because it was on the program, not because Victoria had arranged for a standing ovation at this moment, though she had arranged for one at a different moment which would now never happen. They stood because for the first time that evening the gratitude in the room was real. Governor Whitaker stood beside Marcus and said, "Sergeant Major Hale, on behalf of a state that should have known your name before tonight, thank you." Marcus looked down at the challenge coin in his hand. He turned it once, the way he had turned it 10,000 times. "No man left outside," he said. The governor's voice, when he responded, was quiet enough that only Marcus heard it. Not anymore. 1 month later, the investigation confirmed what the documents had shown. Liberty Valor Foundation had misallocated more than $3 million over the course of a decade. The money had moved through a careful infrastructure of reclassified expenses and related party contracts, constructed to survive casual inspection and to deflect serious inquiry by invoking the emotional weight of its mission. Victoria Langford resigned from the Foundation's board before the audit's first formal report was published. She issued a statement through her attorney that used the words "deeply regret" and "procedural errors" and "commitment to accountability." No one who had been at the gala required translation. The civil suits from major donors arrived within 6 weeks. Grant Ellison resigned from the governor's campaign office and referred all inquiries to his legal representation. The Ethics Commission opened a formal investigation. The process would take time, as processes do, but it had begun. The Foundation's remaining unrestricted funds, the portion that had not already been committed to contracts or expenses, were frozen and then redirected. A portion went to the veteran assistance programs that the Foundation had been claiming to operate. The rest was held in a supervised account, pending the final distribution plan from the independent board. Marcus declined every interview request. There were several. Patricia Owens was the most persistent, and Marcus respected her for that, and he met with her once over coffee and told her that the story was Aaron Bell's story, and the story of every name that got left off a report because someone decided it was inconvenient. If she wanted to write that story, he would talk to her about Aaron. She wrote it. It ran on a Sunday. Several people who had served with Aaron read it and called a number that was now printed at the bottom of a new organization's website. The organization was called the Aaron Bell Honor Fund. It was small. Its board was 5 people, 3 veterans, an accountant and a retired attorney who had known Marcus for 12 years and agreed to serve without compensation. Its operating budget in the first year was modest and fully disclosed. Every application was reviewed by a human being who returned phone calls. Every allocation was reported publicly on a quarterly basis. There was no gala. There was no projection screen. There were no centerpieces. In its first year, the Aaron Bell Honor Fund provided housing assistance to 23 veterans, job placement support to 31, and referrals to mental health services to 68. The numbers were not large by the standards of the organizations that held galas in hotel ballrooms. They were large by the standard of the people they reached. Governor Whitaker came to the formal charter signing without a press corps. He brought his legal counsel and one aide. He sat in a folding chair and signed the documents at a folding table in the back room of a community center in a neighborhood where some of the fund's first beneficiaries lived. Before he left, he gave Marcus an envelope. Inside was a document, a formal amendment to the classified mission report from 2005. A revision that had required years of bureaucratic process through military records, a declassification review, and a request that had been filed and refiled and carried through multiple offices by a man who had not stopped pushing it forward since the night of the gala. The revision added a name to the mission record. It added a rank, a biography, a citation, and a full accounting of the role played by Staff Sergeant Aaron Bell in the execution and completion of Operation Southern Shield. Aaron Bell was no longer unknown. Marcus read the document twice. He read it the way you read something you have been waiting for long enough that the reading of it feels like a different kind of time. Slower, heavier, the weight of all the years that preceded this moment pressing in from every side. He folded the document carefully. He put it back in the envelope. He set the envelope on the table and placed his right hand flat on top of it, his palm covering the name printed on the outside side. He stayed like that for a while. He did not cry the way a person cries in a film. He bowed his head. He placed 2 fingers on the name beneath his palm, and he stayed there until the weight had settled into something he could carry again. Differently now. Lighter, not because it was less, but because it had finally been acknowledged by the world it had always deserved acknowledgement from. Several weeks later, on an evening when the rain was light enough to call it mist, Marcus drove across the city to a building on the east side, a converted commercial space with new signage on the door and a row of folding chairs visible through the front window. The sign read, Aaron Bell Honor Center, serving those who served, beneath the center's name, in smaller letters, no man left outside. Marcus parked the car and sat for a moment with the engine off. Through the window, he could see a man at the reception desk talking to a veteran who had come in from the cold. He watched the man at the desk lean forward, the way a person leans when they are actually listening. He got out. He opened the umbrella, not the broken-ribbed one. That one was somewhere else, somewhere that would matter again in a moment, and he walked toward the door. Before he reached it, a man was coming out. Older, moving slowly, a jacket that had been a good jacket years ago. He stopped under the overhang and looked at the sky. Marcus held the umbrella over both of them. The man looked at him with the measuring assessment of someone who has spent time in environments where reading people quickly was a survival skill. "You work here," he said. Marcus looked at the sign, at the name, at the words beneath it. "Something like that," he said. Behind them, on the other side of the parking lot, a car door opened. Governor Daniel Whitaker walked toward the center. He was not in a suit. He was in a dark jacket, and he was carrying something. The broken umbrella. The one with the cracked rib that had bent in the wrong direction. Sometime in the middle of a long rainy night. The one Marcus had used for months before replacing it. The one that had been in the back of the town car since the night of the gala. The governor held it up. "Let me get the door this time." Marcus looked at him. 19 years is a long time to carry something that the world decided was not worth carrying. It is a long time to drive people from one place to another and know things you don't say. And to hold a coin in your pocket that has a message on it that no one around you can read. And to wait for the moment when the right room is finally full of the right people, and the truth finally finds enough space to stand in. Marcus nodded. They walked through the door together. The man who had refused to leave anyone behind, and the man who had been saved by that refusal. The door swung open. The light came out into the mist, warm and steady, and nobody was left outside. They called him just the black driver because that was the smallest version of him they could understand. But Marcus Hale had never been small. He had carried men out of danger on a road with no name. He had carried a forgotten name across 19 years of silence. He had carried the truth into a room built entirely on applause. By the time the governor stood and raised his hand in salute, the people who had used honors as decoration had lost their stage, and the man they left standing in the rain became the reason the doors finally opened for everyone who had been waiting. Some names get left off the report. Some men get left outside the door. But the truth does not expire. It just waits for the right moment and the right hands in the right room. And when it arrives, it does not arrive loudly. It arrives the way Marcus Hale moved through every room he ever entered, with both hands, with full attention, with the quiet certainty of a man who knows that what he is carrying matters, and who will not put it down until every name is right.